Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Walking Through the Book of Exodus. Listen, I'm your host, Ruel Barksdale, and I will be with you as we look through this phenomenal book of Exodus. It is a phenomenal book because it is a book that gives us hope. And if you are a leader or a manager, it's a great book to study the art of leadership and management. So I'd like you to get paper, get pencil, get your Bible, get your iPad, get your phone, wherever you keep your word, and we will walk through this phenomenal book. If I were to try to create a theme for our study today, the theme would be a story that just doesn't make sense. All right? So let's get what we need to get. I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then we will start looking at this phenomenal second chapter of the book of Exodus. Okay, now we're going to start our lesson today, our walk today, with the end of the first chapter of the book of Exodus. So at the end of the first chapter of the book of Exodus, there's a death sentence, and Pharaoh, who seems to at this point be the most evil person that we have encountered thus far in the Bible. He's angry, he's afraid, he's anxious. Why is he angry? Why is he afraid? Why is he anxious? Because God keeps blessing these Israelites, and they're growing in numbers. You remember the first thing that God told man to do is be fruitful and multiply, and they're doing that, which means that they're doing what God told them to do, and God is blessing them. And so, why would you try to curse what God has blessed? That's a dangerous thing. But Pharaoh doesn't understand that because he looks at them and they're different from him. They're not like us. They don't have our culture. They don't have our language. They don't have our accent. They don't wear the clothes we wear. They don't eat the foods we eat. They don't live the way we live. They're not like us. We got to stop them. These immigrants are taking over our land. We got to stop them. But what do you want us to do, Pharaoh? I want you to kill every young male. I want you to throw them into the river as soon as they're born. If it's a girl, all right, let them live. But if it's a boy that might one day go to war, if it's a boy that might one day challenge us, if it's a boy that will grow, and you notice that people like Pharaoh are never really afraid of the babies. They're afraid of the men that they will grow up to be. And the only way to stop them is to kill them. We don't have prisons yet, so just kill them. We've already got them enslaved, but they're still growing, just kill them. They're not part of our politics yet, just kill them. And so we end chapter 1 with then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, talking about the Israelites. Every boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Now, there is a word that I have to introduce to you again, or reintroduce to you, that we will see in this story that doesn't make sense. And the word is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism. That is the attribution of human characteristics or behavior to a god, an animal, or an object. Okay, so we'll see that and we'll revisit that word when we get closer to the end of this chapter. So let's read. Now, a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. We don't know the name of the man, we don't know the name of the woman, and even the child's name is not yet known. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Wait. The Bible does not usually talk about the beauty of the characters in the Bible. We don't know if Adam and Eve are beautiful or not. We don't know if Cain or Abel were handsome or not. We do know that Sarah was a beauty. We know that Rachel was beautiful. But I believe that this is the first time where we see a baby boy. He's described as fine. He was so fine. She said, "Look, I don't care what Pharaoh does. There's something different about this child. I know this might cost me my life, but I'm going to hide him." But when she could not hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister, we don't know her name yet, she would be Miriam. And a lot of theologians suggest that the mother was Jochebed and the father was Amram, but there are theologians that say not so. Bible here doesn't tell us. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister, we don't know her name yet, we would later know that her name was Miriam, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter, we don't know her name yet, we don't even know Pharaoh's name yet, we just have his title, went down to the Nile to bathe. Now, understand, this doesn't make sense. The same water that was a death sentence for the children of Israel boys is a place for refreshment for her. The same water where baby boys were being thrown in to die, to drown at birth, was a place of refreshment for her. My brother, my sister, sometimes the water that you're in, the situation that you're in, the environment that you're in, some might have created it for a death sentence. But when God's hands are on your life, you can't stop what God has started. You can't curse what God has blessed. You can't halt what God has given momentum to. And some would ask, well, I was in the same family with so, I went to the same schools with so and so. I was in the same situation with so and so, and they went this way and I went that way. It's not the water, it's the hand of God on your life. It's not the water, it's not the Nile that's causing death and life in this situation. It's the will of God. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. She's worried about her little brother. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. She knew he's not one of us. He doesn't have the same skin tone. The amount of melanin in his body is different. He's got a different shade. The hair texture is different. He's not one of us. And even though my Father has created an order, not a suggestion, not a desire, an order to kill him, I feel something about this baby. He was crying, and I feel sorry for him, even though I see he's one of them Hebrew babies. Then his sister, Miriam, who'd been watching, she sees Pharaoh's daughter have the slaves pull him out of the water. She goes to Pharaoh's daughter. "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." This doesn't make sense, y'all. The mother who puts her baby, she's distraught, tears running down her face, puts her baby in the river of death. Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby, feels sorry for the baby, takes the baby out of the water. The baby's sister goes to Pharaoh's daughter. "Shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse this baby for you?" She takes the baby back to her mother, and Pharaoh's daughter pays Moses' mother to nurse him. That doesn't make sense. My brother, my sister, God's got a plan for your life. And sometimes you're in a situation, you're in an environment, you're in a circumstance, you're in an experience that just doesn't make sense. But what I've got to believe and what you've got to believe is God's got a plan for your life. And no whether I'm in the water or I've been pulled out of the water, whether I'm being rescued by an enemy or being nurtured and nourished by a friend, God's got a plan. Got a plan for your life. And God's plan cannot be stopped. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Moses would spend the next 40 years in the house of Pharaoh. He's got the finest clothes. He's eating the finest food. He's cultured. He's being educated in all the sciences and all the maths, and he's learning how to speak properly. He's learning how to walk with those that are cultured and defined. One day, after Moses had grown up, he's about 40 years old now. He went out to where his own people stopped. Who are his own people? He hasn't had any interactions with the Hebrews. He's grown up in Pharaoh's house. There are no Hebrews in Pharaoh's house. Who are his own people? My brother, sister, my sister, I know you got an education. I know you're sophisticated now. I know you got a degree or two. You live in a fine house, drive a fine car, wear fine clothes, listen to nice music. But who are your people? Do you look down on those that don't have what you have? Do you look down on those that are still struggling to make it? Do you look down on those that are still on government programs? Who are your people? How do you define yourself? One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to watch his own people. His own people were and watch them at their hard labor. They got blue collar jobs. They're not working in the offices. They're working with the sweat of their brow. They're working with their hands being torn and tattered. He saw an Egyptian, somebody that he could relate to, somebody that he might have grown up with. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Bible says own twice in this very short period of time. He's differentiating. I know I've got the finest things. I got the finest car. I know I can get on an airplane and travel all over the world. I know I eat at the finest restaurants. But I know who I am. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Glancing this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day, he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Hmm. There's something about Moses. He doesn't understand what it was. He doesn't understand what it is. There's something about him. He doesn't like people being harmed. He doesn't like people being hurt. He doesn't like to see the hostility between brothers. He doesn't like to see the hostility between those that have power and those that don't. He's got a heart for people, y'all. That's why I believe this book of Exodus is a great book to study leadership. We got so many people that want to lead, but they don't have a heart for people. We got so many people that want to lead, but they want to differentiate between the haves and the have-nots. We've got so many people that want to say, I've got this, you get yours. They don't know who they are. They don't know what to say when we talk about our people. It's God's people. It's humanity. That should be your people. Whether I'm rich or poor, educated or uneducated, I'm a human being. The man said, so these are two Hebrews fighting. This isn't a Hebrew and an Egyptian. These are two Hebrews fighting. The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, oh my God, the gig's up. What I did must have become known. When Pharaoh heard this, he tried to kill Moses, the ruler of the whole nation, the commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. He tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled. Moses fled from Pharaoh. Moses fled from the man that was responsible for his upbringing. Moses fled from the person who had given him an education. Moses fled from the person who had given him culture and the finer things. He fled. Why? Because because see, you think you've got it all under control and you've reached the status in life, but Pharaoh didn't see him as his own people. I know it doesn't make sense, but Pharaoh, I know even though he was raised in Pharaoh's house, Pharaoh didn't see him as one of his own. How dare you kill an Egyptian? You Israelite? When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now, a priest of Midian had 7 daughters. We don't know the names, we don't know the priest's name. We'll find out soon. There's a name I love. You'll see why in a second. 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue. Here's this heart again. He didn't know these 7 daughters, but he knows they don't need to be harassed. And he sees them being harassed and driven away from what they had been told to do. Go get some water for the sheep. Uh, he can't stand to see them being hurt and harmed, even though he doesn't know them. And so he takes up for them. Not only does he take up for them and drive these heathens away, he feeds the flock for them. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Ruel, you know why I love that name. The name Ruel, interpreted in Hebrew, means Ru means friend, El means of God. When the girls returned to Ruel, who was a priest of Midian, of the Midianites, when the girls returned to Ruel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian." See, they didn't know he was an Israelite. Why? Because he sounded like an Egyptian. He walked like an Egyptian. He carried himself as one who had authority and power, but he still knew who he was. They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "And where is he?" he asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. We know her name. We know Moses' name. We know the. See, you got to understand in your environment. This is going to be hard, but you got to understand what is important for you to know and what is not. There are some names, there are some characters, there are some places, there are some things that you got to know. But there are some names, some characters, some places, some things that aren't really necessary for your story at this moment. You got to know what's important in this moment. Later, we'll find out that Moses' sister's name is Miriam. We don't need to know that right now. Later, we'll find out perhaps that his mother and father was Amram and Jochebed, and some theologians would discuss that, but we don't need to know it right now. Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I have become an alien in a foreign land. Lord, what happened to me? Now I'm the immigrant. I was raised with the finest of things, the finest culture, the finest clothes, the finest music, the finest. I knew the maths, I knew the science, I'd studied astrology. I and now I'm sitting here as an immigrant in a foreign land raising sheep. Moses was in the palace for 40 years. He'd raise sheep for another 40. During that long period, the king of the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery. Here comes the anthropomorphism, and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning and he remembered. God doesn't forget, so he doesn't have a need to remember. That's an anthropomorphism. God heard their groaning and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked down on Israel, like the Israelites, and was concerned. God didn't just get concerned because he heard them crying. That's an anthropomorphism. And God was concerned about them. My brother and sister, when we look back on this story, there's so many things that just don't make sense. I mean, Pharaoh demands that all the baby boys be killed at birth by being thrown into the river. And yet, when his mother places him into the river, he finds life. The daughter of Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh was the daughter of the one who sentenced him to death, finds him and feels for him, even though she immediately sees that he's a Hebrew boy. And she's and when Miriam, his sister, approaches her, um, she agrees to pay his mother to nurse him. That makes sense. Moses is raised with the finest things in life, 40 years, but he still doesn't feel like an Egyptian. And so he kills an Egyptian that is quote unquote mistreating his own people. That doesn't make sense. What am I trying to say to you? There's going to be things in your life that just don't make sense. You're going to figure out, well, you're going to wonder, why am I sitting among the sheep when I was raised to be in the palace? That doesn't make sense. Why are the people that were born to hurt me helping me? That doesn't make sense. Why have I been disassociated from my family and my friends and put in a different environment? That doesn't make sense. Well, what does make sense? God's got a plan for your life. And there are going to be moments when what happens to you, what you experience, your exposure, your environment, just doesn't make sense. But you and I, my brother, my sister, have to understand that God's got a plan for our life. Moses had to raise and shepherd sheep so he would learn how to shepherd God's people. Moses was in Pharaoh's house so he would learn how to be a strong leader. And Moses doesn't see it in himself. He doesn't see himself as a leader. He just knows that he's got a heart for people. He just knows that he doesn't stand it. He can't stand to see people hurt. I don't know what's in your heart. I don't know what temperament you have. But I want you to know this. So there'll be people that don't understand why you feel certain ways about certain things. But that's part of the plan. Everything that's happened in your life is part of God's plan and God's purpose for you. And he's taking you someplace. What you and I have to do is we have to learn how to be patient and trust him to do what he said he was going to do. Exodus is a beautiful book for studying the power and the purpose of God. What I want you to do is read chapter 3 for next week. Please hit like and share. Tell a friend, tell an enemy about our walk through the book of Exodus. And perhaps next week, by the time we're done, you and your enemy will be friends. I love you. God loves you more. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.